All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mega Alumni Podcast. We are back again with another episode with another alumni joining us and sharing about her experiences. My name is Nehal. I'm a PhD candidate at The Ohio State University doing my PhD in mechanical engineering. And Mega is our graduate student organization. As a part of this organization, we are trying to help connect our grad and undergrad students with alums from our department. Today, joining me, I have two other fellow Mega members, Lillian and Julia, who are also co-hosting this episode with me. If you're interested in finding out any of our other events or what can I say, competitions, giveaways, social events, any of those, feel free to check out all of our different social media channels that are listed in the YouTube description page. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our guest for today, Dr. Cherry Gupta, who's currently working at Battelle after she finished her PhD from the Ohio State University from our department. I'll hand it over to you now, Dr. Gupta. Can you give us a brief background and an introduction as to what you're doing at Battelle?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for this opportunity, Nehal, Lillian, and Julia. It's really nice to be here. Like you said, Cherry Gupta, I'm a senior research scientist at Battelle Memorial Institute, which is headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. So, right next to OSU, actually, we can see the Wexner Medical Center from my office. I did my PhD at OSU in the mechanical engineering department. I was co-advised by Carlos Castro, and my advisor was Dr. James Lee, actually, who was over in the chemical and biomolecular engineering department. I think he's retired now. My bachelor's was, I did a master's also in mechanical engineering, and my bachelor's was in electrical engineering from India, from the Delhi College of Engineering, which is now called I think Delhi Technological Institute.
Yes. By the way,
Uh,
I did my bachelor's from there, so we have the same. Yeah,
oh my God, that is so cool.
yeah,
Okay, DTU, right? What do you
yes,
call it?
DTU. Yeah,
Yeah, that is so nice. We have to chat more then later because,
of course.
yeah. Which department were you in?
I was in mechanical.
Mechanical. Okay, okay. Yeah, I got into production, but then I kind of,
Switched
upgrade.
majors.
It's
Okay.
called upgrade.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I changed it to electrical.
Got it.
Um, Anyway, so in my current role at Battelle, I work on several different projects or areas of interest, really. So one of them is developing nanoparticles, and we use polymers for this for drug and gene delivery applications. The other, which was kind of inspired by mm, my time in Castro Lab, I was not really doing the stuff they're doing, but through diffusion, some of it kind of transferred to me. So we make nanostructures with DNA using a technique called DNA origami, and looking at different kinds of biological and solid state applications for it. And then thirdly, this is like the newest area of interest for me that I'm getting really more and more interested in is what is called organ on chip. So making microphysiological systems for understanding mechanistic behavior at the cell and tissue level. Uh, what I'm doing is more to develop a platform for testing therapeutics for a disease called Neurofibromatosis 1 or NF1. So those are like the three areas that I work in currently. So I'll keep it brief to that and then answer more questions as you have.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that information. I was
Sure.
wondering, what sparked your interest in working on such a small scale of research?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I started off in electrical engineering, but this was electrical engineering in power systems. So we studied a lot of DC motors, induction motors, and uh, power lines, and I was not really enjoying it during my undergrad. So looking for something else. And then while I was in Delhi, there was this conference on sensors and micro electronics. And there's an institute called Indian Institutes of Science in Bangalore in India. And a professor from there was giving a talk on, it was a new topic then called MEMS, or micro electromechanical systems. And he gave a talk and he talked about how cool MEMS are and that we should be adopting it. And none of the labs in India was doing it at that point. And his lab was just getting started at IISc. So after his talk, I caught up with him and chatted, and it was really enlightening because, I'm very interested in, I was always very interested in physics and electromagnetism, and but electrical engineering, like the power system part, didn't seem to be a good fit for me. So this new area that he was talking about, which is sensors at a smaller scale, really appealed to me, and he invited me to come work in his lab. So I did an internship one of the summers in his lab at IISc, and there I got to work on these sensors they were making. My job was to work with a low capacitance circuit and use a capacitance to digital converter and use the signal from the capacitance circuit to try to convert it into digital and interface it with a sensor that they had. Anyway, what I realized in all of that was that a lot of things the noise levels that at the macro scale don't matter start mattering at the small scale, right? You can't ignore it. And I found that physics really interesting. So I started looking more into the sensor world. And from then, I did another internship at NTU, which is in Singapore, and kind of, moved in that small sensor field, MEMS field. And then when chance came to apply for my graduate studies, there was not much happening again in the power systems world. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to stick to MEMS because it was interesting. And I had done a couple of projects by then. So that's how I kind of, quote unquote, chose it, but not really, I was just following my passion that, okay, this is something I enjoy doing. And from then, I've kind of picked up different projects that aligned, sort of aligned, but also not aligned. I don't know. It's been all over the place, but that was the start of it.
Well, thank you. It's interesting to hear how you kind of followed that path. And I guess a follow-up question to that would be, in your current role, what do your duties kind of entail? You talked about leading multiple projects, but what does your day-to-day look like, and how do those projects, I guess, play out?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with telling you a little bit about Battelle. So Battelle is a nonprofit. We are driven by our mission to translate scientific discoveries into societal benefit. And because we are a nonprofit, we invest a lot of our profit into internal R&D and STEM education. So one of the projects that I've been fortunate enough to be involved with, which was an internal R&D investment by Battelle, is in developing a platform for drug and gene delivery. So that started around 4 or 5 years ago now. And we've been making a platform where we can make these nanoparticles in high throughput, and then we screen them for a specific disease application. So in my current role, I have 2 externally funded projects that utilize this platform. So one of them is, actually both of them are funded by the Gilbert Family Foundation, which is a philanthropic foundation, and their goal is to find a cure for this disease that I mentioned before, NF1, which affects pediatric patients. So I manage those 2 projects. So my day-to-day is really managing small to big aspects of those projects. We have collaborators on both of those projects, which are at universities. So the meeting that I was just in was with the professors from other universities that I collaborate with, and we were talking about the progress on the project, how close we are to our milestones, what the data looks like. A lot of it is also, talking to other scientists, designing the experiments that we would be conducting next week, after. And then, of course, those are the day-to-day of executing what you already have. And a good chunk of my time also goes in thinking, what are we going to be doing in the next like 3 to 5 year timeline, right? So what are the next kind of ideas? What proposals do I want to write? Which fields do I feel interested in? And apart from that, there's always like mentoring that, we have going on within Battelle and outside. And I think, all of that, along with the fact that I am a mother of 2 kids, takes away like, gives me that balance of work and life. So, yeah, that's pretty much my day to day, I would think. Sorry, did I miss some part of your question? I don't know if I answered all of it.
Yeah, I think you did. You did good.
Thank you for sharing. And that's an interesting insight. And I actually did not know that Battelle was not for profit. So
Yes.
that's something new I learned today.
Got
Uh, yeah, and I think that kind of brings up the following question that I have, which is, so does Battelle also end up going all the way to once they invest into the R&D projects like what you're working on, do you internally then try to commercialize it as well and then like get it all the way to the technology readiness level that we keep talking about, the TRL level? Like, does it go all the way up to being something like a commercial product that then Battelle sells, or do you license out your research? Like, how does that work when it
Kind of groups and different backgrounds you're working with for these projects?
Yeah. So when I was interviewing with Battelle, the thing that struck me the most was the interdisciplinary nature of the work that goes on here. And I know you asked about collaborators; those are like outside of Battelle, but I thought I'll give you a little bit of insight into how Battelle works. Because a lot of it, I think Battelle is like the best kept, like best hidden secret or something. We are doing so much, but nobody finds out about it because we are a contract research organization, so you don't see our name on things unless like it's a company we spin out. Anyway, so I met people who are doing oil and natural gas, or they are doing informatics or proteomics, cyber security. I'm in the materials department, so we do a lot of materials related stuff. So the sheer breadth of knowledge here was really amazing when I came in. That wow, there's so much expertise here. So in my current projects, for example, we have material scientists, obviously, chemical engineers who work in the lab to make those nanoparticles. We characterize them. Then we have a team from our health business line where, they are biologists and, a lot of experts in cell and animal study. So we get those who, and then, toxicologists. And those are just the people who work with me on my projects, right? Or rather, I work with them on our projects. And that's internal. And then there are all these people who work on developing the business. So we have BD people or the business development people. We have program managers who make sure that the projects are kept on track. We are delivering our milestones. And yeah, so it's really an ecosystem that ensures that we deliver on time and we are meeting, the goals that we set for ourselves and for our clients. So it's really the interdisciplinary nature is key to what we do here, and we pride ourselves that we have people from all sorts of backgrounds that we can leverage in the projects that we are doing. And then, of course, we don't have everything. So when I work on a project for NF1, for example, I went out and found collaborators who are experts in NF1. They've worked, these are professors or doctors who have worked in the field for 10, 15 years, and their expertise is invaluable, right? So their collaboration is critical to ensuring that what we do is relevant to the field. And so, that is also encouraged, that we, seek the experts and kind of make the machinery run, right, by having the right kind of people contribute.
Well, I think you may have answered this a little bit, but I suppose whenever I hear anything about projects on the nanoscale, especially regarding biology, for your work or your position specifically, how much of the focus is understanding the actual cell biology versus like the building of the technology, and like existing mechanisms, things like that?
Yeah. So it's a question we debate a lot and talk about, because Battelle is, as much as we do really deep work, we are not an academic institute, right? Our goal is to do applied science and translate technology into products or services that can be used. So there are often those points during our research when we're sitting down and something is not working, and you have that fork in the road, right? Like, you can either spend a lot of time investing, oh, well, why doesn't it work? And what is the mechanism of what's going on at the cellular level? Or you can say, okay, let's try this other thing and see if that works, right? So it's never straightforward. It's always a, cost benefit analysis. And if it makes sense to invest a little bit of time and effort to get the right answer, we will look at cellular levels, because we are all scientists, right, at heart, and we want to inherently understand what is going on. But if it's coming up against time and we think that pivoting to something else might help us move forward, then we choose that over studying things in detail, because essentially, that's not what we are after. So we're really driven by our end goals. If something is going to get us closer to that, then we'll do it. If not, then we'll change paths, and hopefully, like, folks like you will find those answers in like research labs.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that is pretty interesting, and I think that fork is always hard to navigate when you're doing research, and there are so many unanswered questions rather than answered questions, I guess. Uh, Now, I was wondering if there's anything more that you can share specifically about the kind of research that you're doing. So you talked about this specific NF1 gene that you're looking at, and I know I saw on the Battelle website in a place also where it was saying that you're working on non-viral delivery platforms for drug and gene delivery applications. So can you talk a little bit as to what this exactly is? I mean, as mechanical and aerospace engineers, I think we are a little out of our realm. So if you can give us some idea as to what this is.
Yeah, totally. So, thankfully or not, I don't know how to put it, but most of the world got to know about these non-viral gene delivery technology during COVID-19 pandemic, right? The Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines were lipid nanoparticle based. So the genetic cargo that was carried into our bodies, if you took a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, was carried by a lipid nanoparticle, so a nanoparticle made with naturally occurring lipids. So the term non-viral comes from the fact that it's not a virus, right? There were, even though, so there are a lot of different kinds of viruses, and viruses have evolved over millennia to become really good at, infecting and getting into human cells and multiplying and using our cellular machinery to replicate and spread, right? That's what they've done. So they're really good at it. So the natural first step that we took, not we as in Battelle, but scientists in general took to delivering drugs was to, take the viral capsid, empty it out of its own genetic material, and put the material that you want delivered as a drug, right? So with the advent of genetic medicine, which means that, medicines cargo that can actually make changes to your DNA, whether it's like changing one base pair or adding a segment of DNA or delivering the whole gene, any of that. Being able to deliver it to the right place in the right amount is really important. So that's how the use of viruses came into being. Now with that, as clinical trials started, they saw that the use of viruses had a lot of drawbacks, right? The first thing is that just as viruses have evolved to infect us, humans have evolved to have immunity against them, right? So over time, we have a lot of naturally occurring antibodies that recognize these viruses, and they will mount immune attack if they see that, right? So, so that makes it harder to give it to somebody, right, as a therapy. Also, because again, they are good at becoming a part of your genome, there is that risk that if you use them for genetic therapy, then long term, it could have that integrational risk that in the future it could cause other diseases like cancer and other things. So immunogenicity, integrational risk, and finally the fact that they are really expensive to make. So most of genetic therapy that is approved is millions of dollars per dose, and obviously not everyone can afford it. And then the cargo capacity of a virus is really small. It can only carry, like the AAVs that are out there, which is adeno-associated viruses, they can only carry about 4.5 kilo base pairs of genetic material, DNA. So that's really small. And so people have always been interested in finding alternatives, right? Like we have this, it doesn't work, has all these risks, so what else can we do? And so lipid nanoparticles and what we work on, polymeric nanoparticles, are alternatives, and which is why they're called non-viral. And essentially, you make nanoparticles out of polymers or lipids. And these nanoparticles, because you are making them, you can tailor their properties. You can make them big, small, different shapes, charges, types. And so that's what we are doing. When we entered the space, we looked at the market, and there's already a lot of interest and research going on in the lipid nanoparticle world. And we had expertise that Battelle had developed over years on using polymers. And so we wanted to, see how polymers could help solve some of the problems that viruses pose with the genetic delivery. And polymers are slightly different than lipids in that lipids have a very limited number of candidates that you can use. Like you have some number of lipids that are available in the market that you can buy, and you can mix them in certain ratios with other components and make a lipid nanoparticle. With polymers, it's an essentially limitless number of monomers that can be polymerized to make polymers, right? So while there is opportunity in having a lot of options, there is also a challenge, right? Like how do you start? How do you design that perfect polymer that will deliver your drug? And so the approach we took was that we are going to use a high throughput synthesis and screening method. So we'll make a lot of it, but because we can't really predetermine which polymer will work for which disease application for a certain target delivery area, we are going to screen all of them and see which one hits the mark, right? And once we get what we call a hit, we are going to optimize it to make it even better for a certain kind of delivery application. So that's the space we are.
Got it.
Thank you for explaining some more about those delivery methods. And I would just assume that, very technically complex projects like this would have not only like disciplinary backgrounds, but also different like levels of researchers. So I was wondering if at Battelle there's like different hierarchies of the researchers and how many would be on, said project.
Yes, we have different levels of people who work here. So and they're all really skilled in the work that they do. So I am a scientist, research scientist, and there are 6 levels of research scientists here. So we start at level 1, which let's say you have a bachelor's or a master's, you would typically start at a level 1. Level 2, which is how when I entered with a PhD, you enter as a level 2 scientist. Again, these are like typical. Somebody's situation could be different. And then level 3 and 4, as you gain, either you have more experience when you enter, or as you gain more experience and take on responsibilities, you kind of go up the scientist ladder. So the top like scientific levels at Battelle are called fellows. And we have 2 of those fellows right now, Amy Hines and Justin Sanchez. So those are like, brilliant minds, both of them. And they provide, besides a lot of other things, strategic direction to, advice as to what we should be doing. And, they also manage a lot of those internal R&D projects that I was talking about earlier. And then, of course, we have a lot of amazing technicians. So you have different levels of technicians. And so this is the scientific line, right? Then there are a scientific or technical path, and then there is the managerial path, which again has its own levels of different people who work in them. So yeah, there's a lot that you can do, and there are a lot of people I know that make that switch, right? They would enter as a scientist, and then they would find this other cool opportunity, and they would change. Or people who enter as chemists, and they figure out, oh, my passion is really in data science, and they find an opportunity within the company, and they switch over. So there's a lot of internal movement that happens, and it's encouraged, right? Like if you can find something that you're passionate about, it's always I found our managers very supportive. And why a lot of people, while they are working here, also get higher degrees. So Battelle supports people getting master's degree, MBAs. So as long as you can make a case for it to your own manager, it's generally approved. So while you're working, you can get these professional degrees, which kind of further your career. So that's also something I love about here.
I had a very quick follow-up there. So you mentioned that there is a managerial track and a research scientist track. As a researcher, do you also end up managing teams at any point, or is that delineated in a very specific manner?
Yeah, a lot of what I do is manage teams right now. Okay. So, for example, when I entered as a level 2, I was an individual contributor, right? My goal was to work on as many projects as I could, figure out what do I like to do, and do the best that I could on those projects. But as you grow, you take on more responsibilities, and so I wrote those proposals and brought in the grants, and then now it's a mix of thinking about the work that we want to do, but also really a lot of it is managing the teams that do the work. So it's like a totally different ball game, right? Like, and it brings its own like challenges. Some of it, I feel that engineers are not trained for adequately. Like you're just thrown out into the world. I feel some other fields like doctors, for example, right? They get this sense of training really to be that. Um, so we are doing a lot internally to kind of do more. We have a emerging scientists and engineers council. We call them ESEC, and that team, their whole focus is to promote the well-being and help with career aspirations of these emerging scientists. And so, as you transition from that being an individual contributor to a team leader, what are the skills that you need? What could you learn to be more successful? And how, because you can, of course, learn on the job, and it takes a few years. But I feel personally that there are always certain skills that you can learn about managing people that can help you be more efficient in what you're doing. And yeah, so we do both. As a technical leader, like as you progress, you are expected to do more. And I find that also a very gratifying part of the work, right? That interacting with people and figuring out, okay, this is what motivates this person. And so, we figure out over time, right, like what that balance is. And it's really nice when you succeed. It takes some time, but you get there. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear about the internal structures of different organizations and companies, and how you build the dream team.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose after we've picked your brain quite a bit about Battelle and your work, did you originally want to work in industry after graduate school, or did you consider um, academia, national laboratories, things like that?
Um, so funny. So when I graduated, it was in 2015, and I had 1-year-old twins, boys, right? So at the time, I was not sure what I was going to do. I was like mostly sleep deprived and just trying to make sense of my time. It was like all a blur. So I looked at different things. I knew I was not gonna go into academia. That I was sure of. My husband is a professor at OSU, and I kind of saw that that's not what I wanted to do. Um, and so I was looking everywhere, really, like just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Um, I did dabble in, like during my undergrad years, I did a lot of entrepreneurship style things. Um, so that was still in me somewhere. So in this time that I was looking, my husband and I, we had like a stealth startup based on technology that came out of his lab. And I enjoyed that process of, right, like trying to sell the technology, going out to VCs. But after a few months of doing that, it just startups are really tough. You have to be 100% all in. And just given that my kids were so little, they were like 1.5 or 2, I just didn't think that that was the right fit for me at the time. And so I just like, I quit one day, like basically, which is telling my husband that I'm not doing this anymore. Um, and I was like back in like looking for what to do next. And so what I did, I feel like I encourage everyone to do now is informational interviews, which is everyone I knew, I started asking them to just meet me and talk to me, like meet me over coffee. And this was not to like get a job in their company, but literally to figure out what their day to day was like, and could I picture myself in their situation, and also how did they get there, right? Like what was their path? Because sometimes you start off thinking, you go from A to B to C and that'll be your career. But for most of the people that I spoke to, they started at A, they went to D, they went to G, and then they somehow ended at C. Like, but they were happy and content with what they were doing. So uh, that opened up my mind a lot to different opportunities. Um, and during one of those informational interviews, I happened to meet this person, Jay Sire, and he works at OSU now in the innovation. I don't remember the name properly, but um, innovation center. And he had just left Battelle. He was the division manager for the materials team. He had just left Battelle and joined OSU, and I was talking to him mostly to see if his innovation center would be a good fit for me. But then he's like, "Oh, have you thought about Battelle?" And I really hadn't. But he put me. He thought I would be a good fit for it, or Battelle would be a good fit for me, and he put me in touch with. Um, Amy Hines, who was a senior scientist here at that point, who's a fellow now here. And we met for a coffee, and I really enjoyed the vision that she, painted for what she had in mind for what Battelle could offer. And what clinched the deal for me really was that at that time, she was working 80% of her time. And for me, it was really important to find something, one that was challenging, but also that allowed me the flexibility to work part-time. And I found that Battelle was really the only place that allowed that, because the other companies that I was looking at in the city, um, they were not that open to part-time work, or they considered it as a less than, kind of position. So this was really nice in that I could still be on really interesting projects, but I started at, I think, 50% of my time. And then gradually, as my kids grew up, I increased my commitment level. And I think that worked out really well for me personally.
Got it.
I think your question was, yeah. Did I want to join academic industry? Yeah.
No, I think that was very insightful, and I think that this conversation and what you're talking about, the thoughts that people have about their career, is something that I think all grad students also have, especially when you're doing
Right.
a PhD, which is so long. I think all of us end up having that conversation at some point with our peers. And that was kind of the whole idea of doing this podcast as well, just trying to get to know how and where some of our alums have reached, and they're doing so many other interesting things that we in our current positions would have never thought of, that oh, a mechanical PhD student or an aerospace PhD student could do that. But
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
no,
thank you
it's an
for, yeah,
awesome initiative. I'm glad that you guys are doing this, and I wish some of it was there for us, because I was mostly like really depressed during my PhD, like, oh my God, what is going to happen to my life?
right.
So
I
yeah.
don't know if all of that has gone away from grad students' lives, but at least we are trying to improve it a little bit by
Yeah,
bit.
I mean, some of it is needed, right? If you don't have that, a little bit of it helps you move forward, right?
Yeah,
Like it keeps you on the edge. Like I need to find the next thing.
yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I guess the question I had while you were having these discussions when you were thinking of joining Battelle, you found out a lot of the reasons why you wanted to probably work there. Did any of the work that you ended up doing during your grad school at UC Santa Barbara or during OSU, your PhD at OSU, did any of that work also like give you some motivation, because Battelle had areas or sectors where that kind of research was being done, that also pushed you, that it like all of those other check boxes are you are able to check them off, but at the same time there is this research kind of synergy based on your, I guess, background as well, which played some role in it.
yeah. Um, so the only thing that has been constant in my life up until graduating was the change, right? Like I started with an electrical engineering background with power systems. Then I did some work with sensors. Then I switched to mechanical engineering with doing nanofluidic work for energy applications. Then I moved to OSU and used micro-nano fluidic devices. So I had dabbled in a lot of stuff. And the reason Battelle felt like a good fit was because we were also doing a lot of different kinds of work at Battelle. So I felt like, okay, I'll be able to find something that,
Mm.
I enjoy doing. So it was not so much how will I apply what I had learned,
Mm.
uh, but, that, okay, given my background and all the different experiences I have, some of it will hopefully apply. And yes, the first 5 years that I worked at Battelle, it was not a direct application of, micro nanofluidics, for example. But, I used in Carlos's lab, for example, I used his turf microscope, which is a total internal reflection fluorescence microscope. So I gotten pretty good at just high resolution microscopy. And the first project they gave me at Battelle was a optical characterization process. So you use bits and pieces of what you learn in different things. But then, of course, there were projects that I knew nothing about. Like I worked on a project for a cabinet making company, and they wanted me to find out alternatives for wood with which cabinets could be made. So it was always, fun. I learned a lot, and I'm sure what I had learned during my undergrad or graduate school came in somewhere. But also, I feel like a PhD trains you to quickly learn about things,
Mm.
right? And that skill itself was really important. So you're new to something. How do you, gain an understanding of the field to an extent that now you can start solving problems in the field? And being able to do that, I think that skill you learn because you are literally on your own during your PhD, right? You're facing problems, you feel like, okay, maybe this is the solution, but then nobody knows about it. So you have to read up, review papers or the latest in the field, and then figure out how can you apply it in a short amount of time to what you are doing. And so making those connections, that skill itself is what you use a lot, I feel, wherever you go. So in that sense, yes, I applied what I had learned, I think. Yeah, a lot of it became slowly relevant and in ways that you don't really realize it's like within you. Um, yeah.
Now before we move on for any further questions, I just wanted to do a time check. So we are at 3:27.
Hmm.
How much more time do you have? We will maybe wrap up accordingly.
I can be around for another 10-15 minutes.
Okay. So I think that should give us more than enough time to just wrap up all the questions. So Lillian and Julia, you can go ahead and ask maybe whatever we have remaining in the list, and then I can do the final wrap up question.
Yeah, so kind of following up with what you just explained about, having our PhD mindset and how we use that in a future job, but did it ever occur to you, like maybe you didn't want to go to grad school, or did you ever try to look at jobs during, after undergrad or after your master's, or was the vision always to complete a PhD?
Yeah, I think so. I journal, and at 12, I had written in one of my journals that I wanted to become a research scientist. So I think I had it like set long ago. That said, in India, when there are a lot of these companies that come to your campus for interviews, and so I did like apply for one, and I had my first job offer was from a consultancy, and I was really like crossing my fingers that I get graduate school acceptance, because if I had not gotten the UCSB thing, I would have like joined that consultancy firm. So um, I mean, that would have been not as ideal, but I'm sure, it would have ended up okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, but I did want to get into research.
One question I did want to ask is kind of your transition from electrical to mechanical engineering. So I've always been aerospace, and that's kind of where my heart is happy. But it's always interesting to hear about people who have made changes in their programs or like specific focuses. So I guess how has that background impacted your work? It's interesting to kind of hear how like fundamentals are maybe different, but it helps you solve problems in a different approach. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier that my undergrad was not where I wanted to be. Like I still was interested in electrical engineering, but more of the smaller kind, like the MEMS sensors. So when I was applying, uh, I got accepted at UC Santa Barbara for my PhD, and my professor Sumita Penathar, she happened to be in the mechanical engineering department, and she said, "Oh, you need to apply to the mechanical engineering department." And I really didn't think twice about it. For me, it was really the work that she was doing, which was using nanofluidics, and she was thinking of this really cool energy conversion application where she had this idea where you could make these nanofluidic channels and put it on the soles of your feet, and when you walk you convert hydrostatic pressure into electrical energy and store it. Anyway, it was an awesome idea that I immediately loved. So that was what I was thinking, right, when I applied to mechanical engineering. But of course the reality is that you go in, and in a PhD program, then I had to learn fluid mechanics and do systems engineering. And um, those you think about, like I didn't think about it, but I was obviously not a natural when I was thinking about Stokes equation and like all the other kind of stuff. It took me some time. But then, you learn. I think at that age, it was probably okay to not worry about it too much. If some other thing is guiding you, then I would say go for it. But yeah, like, for me, the contrast has been my husband, who's done electronics, electrical engineering. So he makes solid state devices, and that's what he's done ever since his undergrad till now. So 30 years or so of being in the same field, so he can intuitively think about the field. I feel like the challenge when you change is that it takes some time, right? Like for you to get good at something, and where to a point where you intuitively think about things. I think that is when you like really master it. But then the upsides are that um, when I talk to our medical devices team here, and they're making a device, I understand the fluidics of it, but I'm also very familiar with the terms that they use for their electrical circuits. And so it really helps that I'm not bothering them about, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? And it makes for a smoother interface, and I can explain to our side of the team, like, this is how it works, because I've done lithography in the past. So a lot of stuff comes in handy that I may not be in the lab doing those processes, but when someone is explaining that, oh, this liftoff process didn't go well, I understand what.
I think we have a bit of a freeze there.
yeah,
I think you guys are frozen, or was I frozen?
It's back for me.
Yeah, you were frozen for us for a bit.
Oh, you guys were frozen for me too. I don't know where I stopped, but
I think you almost covered it.
okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, Thank you for sharing all of that information and, talking about your journey, all the way from bachelor's to grad school to post grad school. We don't want to take up more of your time. So I'll do our usual wrap up question that I do with every podcast guest, which is, if you wanted to share any advice for current grad students in the department, who are at three different stages, what would your advice be? So the first stage is somebody who just came into the grad program, just starting off maybe in their first year. The other one is someone who is somewhere midway through. They're done with few years, but they still have few years left. And then the other is for the folks who are maybe in their final year, final semester. They're literally looking for jobs right now. They're about to wrap up. What advice would you give to all of them?
Maybe I'll go backward because it's
Sure.
easiest for me to start with people who are like looking for jobs. Um, I already mentioned this, but I think what I benefited from a lot was doing these informational interviews. So if you're looking and you already know what you're going to do, then awesome. But if you don't and you're in the stage where you're trying to figure out, what is the right thing for me to do, because the opportunities can seem like a lot and you don't know the skills that you've learned, how does that translate into a role that you're seeing advertised, right? Like a staff engineer, like you don't know what it means. So it really helps to talk to someone in the field that you're interested in, get them to meet you for a coffee, like, and just ask them. Most people love talking about themselves, and ask them, how did you get here and what was your path? And I feel like a lot of that can, the important things can stay with you and help you determine the path you want to take. And of course, you're making connections as you talk to them. So that's my advice for, and no choice is wrong. I feel like even if you end up in a first job that you don't like or is not the right fit, you'll end up, knowing people there. The currency is people. I think if you have good relationships and, if you make those connections, you really never know when those people come back in your life. So it it always, as long as you can learn something from it, it's good. Mid PhD, that was a tough time for me, and I feel like that is a crucial time when you are like 2 years in, you worked on a couple of projects. If it's worked and you're doing well, you're getting great results and you're interested, then of course you know what you need to do. But if it's not working, then you should actively look for other things that you want to do, right? Like sometimes, and it also really depends on what your advisor is like. If your advisor is very hands-on and really invested in what you're doing or has a project for you, then it's great, right? Like for me, my advisor was hands-off advisor, and he kind of gave me the freedom to choose what I wanted to do, and that's good or bad, right? Like I didn't have him around to ask a lot of questions, but then he let me choose what I wanted to do, and that's how I took a class from Carlos around that time. He had just joined OSU, and I really loved the material he was teaching, and tried to figure out how I could work with him. And I feel like that was a good pivot in my personal career. So going out and taking classes, I took a lot of other classes at OSU. I took art classes. I took classes in Sanskrit. It just like was so fascinating for me that all of this was happening. So I took advantage of all of that while I was there. So, and I made like my best friend now is, she was an art student, sorry, a landscape architect, not an art student. So you never know where those things lead to. So that's a really, and that brings me to the first year, right? Like that's a really good time to try a lot of stuff because you don't have the pressures of research. You can really explore taking different classes and meeting people. Um, but at the same time, trying to figure out early what that focus would be. And again, depending on your advisor, some advisors already have it um, cut like a project cut out for a student. And that's great. You can, start learning from the lab mates in your group. And that's always great. Like if you can ask somebody if you can just like shadow them in the lab, that's one of the best experiences because you see what they're doing, those tips and tricks. Before those like fourth, fifth years graduate, you should like really make it a point to learn from them because they have so much that they've learned, just by the sheer act of being consistent and doing it day in and out day. Um, it almost becomes an art at some point, right? If you've done something for so long of little tricks. So definitely kind of find some fourth, fifth years will allow you to shadow them and learn from them at that point because it's low stress and they'd be happy to have you tag along. Yeah, I think those would be my tips and
Sounds,
tricks.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's, I think, again, a very good set of instructions for PhD students at all those different stages. I think a lot of the other guests have also in many different words have kind of, I think, conveyed the same feelings. So it's kind of interesting to see that a lot of people, once they are done with their PhDs or grad school in general, they've come around to this kind of same set of rules or advice for grad students. So that's good to again hear once again from you as well. Thank you very much for making time for this and doing this with us. Is there anything else that you would like to share in terms of opportunities at Battelle? I know you just briefly talked about the career page, and if there's anything that you want to highlight before we wrap up the recording.
No, yeah. The career page at Battelle is where we post all our jobs. And even if something is not listed, you can reach out to, any of us from Battelle on our LinkedIn pages or just email us. And we are always looking for bright minds. So for either for internships or for working here. So I welcome all of that. And finally, thank you to all three of you. This is an awesome initiative that you guys have started. Thank you for having me over. I really enjoyed the conversation, but also, you know, you're doing this for the greater good. I'm sure a lot of grad students will listen to this and can benefit, something that I didn't have as I was graduating. And I felt like, oh my God, what do I do? So having this can be useful for those kids. So thank you for doing this. And, I know you're taking classes and doing all your research. So doing this an extra bit of work is takes time and effort. So good job there.
Thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully that we are also hoping that this does help out fellow grad students, just like us. I guess in some ways we are also doing that same informational interview thing that you were talking about, but we're just trying to make it available on YouTube as well. Yeah, thank you very much once again. And thank you, Lillian and Julia, also for joining me co-host this episode. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.